Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the International Rare Disease Showcase. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this event that we've been planning for a fairly long time now, and that's on behalf of me and the rest of the team at Beacon. If you don't know who I am, I'm Philippa, and I'm the projects coordinator at Beacon, and I'm going to be chairing this first main stage session today, and it's great to see you all virtually on the platform today. So to kick off, I just want to say a big thank you to all of the sponsors for this event. We wouldn't be able to put on an event like this without these sponsors. So a big thank you to our corporate partner Helix, our gold sponsor Pulse InfoFrame, our other gold sponsor Bionicle EMAS, and also Apparito, and then our silver sponsor Usa Pharma, bronze sponsor Gilead, and another bronze sponsor, PTC Therapeutics, Roche, and Rhythm Pharmaceuticals. Thank you so much for all of your support and supporting our mission as Beacon. So we're actually announcing a lot of exciting things today. It's a big week over here at Beacon HQ, and we're going to learn a bit more about this later from Rick and Tony and Nick, so I'm not going to touch on this too much. But if you haven't been aware, we are becoming Beacon, we have become Beacon, and we were previously known as Find a Cure, but you will have a little bit more about that later. And you can find us on social media at Rare Beacon. If you already followed us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, they all say the same, but we do have a new Instagram, so you need to get on your phones now or after the session and go and follow us over there. We'd love to watch those follow numbers grow, and we really want you to watch our journey on all the social media platforms. You can also access our new website at the web address here. And then if you're not aware of who the team is, we're all staying the same faces. So we've got Rick Thompson, our CEO, Mary Rose Roberts, our head of ops, Laura Thompson Harper, our fundraising manager, me, the projects coordinator, Blaine Baker, our marketing and engagement manager, Hannah Harvey, whose 1 year anniversary it is today, who's our project officer, our newest member of staff, Sophia, who's our fundraising officer, and then Freya Turner, our design intern, who's been doing all the wonderful work on getting Beacon lifted off the ground. So if you're new to any of our events, or if you've not attended a rare disease showcase in the past, you might be wondering, what is a rare disease showcase and why does it matter? Or you might think it's pretty obvious, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So a showcase is a celebration of excellence in rare diseases and an opportunity to connect with fellow stakeholders from across the entire rare disease space. So we bring together clinicians, researchers, patient group advocates, students, anyone you could think of who's involved in this space. We want to bring them together and build connections. And it's a chance to build an unstoppable community. And we really put that at the heart of this event. A little bit about the showcases we've run in the past. So our series began with the Birmingham Showcase long before my time in 2016. And then since we've hosted 10 showcases in 7 different cities across the UK. In 2020, we had our first virtual showcase, and we saw an increased number of attendees because it was online. More people could access that, which was really great. And then this international showcase will be the 12th in our series and our biggest and most ambitious event to date. So it's really exciting to be a part of it. And you might also be thinking, wow, a new angle, why host an international showcase? And there's a lot of good reasons for why we wanted to go international with this. Obviously, rare diseases are a global healthcare challenge. They're really coming to the forefront with some new developments in policy that we've seen recently. Small patient population numbers mean that we need to have action across borders to really face the challenge of rare diseases, and you're going to learn a bit more about that in the session that's coming up now. And digital tools and innovation have really opened up the world since 2020. So we've seen some really good improvements from the situation that the world has been in, as well as obviously the challenges that everyone has been facing. And major rare disease progress is already taking place on an international level, and we wanted to bring everyone together to learn from that, to share in successes, learn from different people's challenges, and really face opportunities together as a united front. And we really believe at Beacon that no one should face their rare disease journey alone. So how international is our showcase? I'll tell you that as well. We have over 550 attendees joining us from all major continents, and we're only missing Antarctica. When I said it was our biggest event to date, I wasn't lying. And we have speakers from 25 different countries. I counted them. I'm not going to read them all out, but there they are for you, which is really exciting and something that's definitely new for us, and hopefully will provide loads of interesting networking opportunities for you as well. We would love to know where you're tuning in from, because we want to know where the attendees are coming from as well as the speakers. So you can let us know in the chat box for the main stage. Now, if you've not used SwapCard before, it's a pretty intuitive platform, but I'm going to take you through some of the things that you can do on there as well. So you can maximize your networking potential by completing your profile. So you can add a photo and a biography so people can know a little bit more about you and decide whether they might want to set up a meeting with you later and build some connections. You can navigate through the showcase menu via the homepage menu and the top banner. It's all there at the top and everything you need is there. There's nothing hidden. So you can really just navigate through and decide where you want to go. You can use the My Event tab at the top to see the sessions that you've signed up for and all the contacts that you've made and meetings you've scheduled. So anything that's personal to you, just head there and you should find it. And then you can keep an eye on an alerts bar to see any incoming messages or notifications. So you get reminders there when sessions are starting, and it's just really handy to know that you're on track with everything. If you're feeling a little bit stuck, there is a lovely platform guidance document, so you can look at that if you ever want any help with SwapCard during this event. You can filter now at the side when you're during the agenda looking at your sessions. So you can look by type or location, and it just makes it really easy to decide which ones that you want to attend. And you can flip through the agenda really easily according to each day. All the sessions will be displayed in your own local time by default, which just makes it a bit easier when we're running an event that's not just UK focused. And then if you want to add it to your calendar, there's a really handy little calendar button with a plus sign on it, so you can add things to your schedule. Make sure you register, so you definitely have a secured spot in a session, as some of them have limited capacity. You can tune into the main stage, which hopefully you're already doing now, directly in SwapCard, and that'll start playing automatically. And you can continue to navigate through the platform whilst doing this, and it should stay on your screen as a little pop-out, so you can have a look around, decide on your afternoon sessions while still being focused on this session. They're all going to be recorded and available to watch on demand throughout February or here on SwapCard, so if you ever want to refer back, that's pretty easy to do. And then we'd love to see you using the live discussion box to chat with fellow delegates and direct questions to our speakers. They will get put into this and we will get your questions answered for you. So we really want to hear what you want to learn from the speakers as well. And make sure to be joining our interactive sessions. We've got breakout sessions and networking sessions that are all going to be hosted through Zoom directly. And these are a real chance to kind of speak to experts directly, network, learn how to better pitch yourself and connect with other attendees. So there's things going on all throughout the day as well as on the main stage that you can really get involved with. And adding to your schedule means you will get a helpful reminder 5 minutes before in your notifications tab. If you want to join these sessions, look out for this little orange Join the Session tab at the bottom. You can also meet fellow attendees through the platform. As I said, we really want to put connecting with others at the heart of this event. So if you go into the attendees area, you can view everyone who signed up for this event and filter by background if you wish. So you can find people who are completely different to you, or you can find people working in the same space if that's what you want. And then you can view the connections that you've already made on the left-hand side of the screen. If you want to start a connection, you need to send a connection request to start a conversation, or you can suggest a meeting with someone as well. And we can actually host meetings one-to-one directly through the SwapCard platform, and there's a handy little timetable as well, so you can do everything that you need to on the platform itself. It's pretty nifty. And don't forget to engage with people across the platform as well. We've got a discussion board so you can introduce yourself and share your thoughts on some key topics with fellow attendees. And also, like I said before, you can join one of our 3 pitch and mix sessions to network directly and really get some face-to-face contact that we've all been missing. We've also got some really cool exhibitors on the platform, and you can go and visit those in the exhibitors tab at the top. And you can also go and look at the posters that people have made and uploaded to the platform and see what other people have been getting up to, and bookmark your favorites with this little tab at the bottom. So hopefully that all went in. If not, like I said, you can view the platform guidance. And without further ado, I think it's really important that we head straight on to the first section, which is called Breaking Down Borders, Empowering an Inclusive and International Community, which is quite a mouthful of a title, but I think we all understand why this session is important. As I said before, rare diseases can't just be defined by national borders, and we need to look beyond these often to build those connections, build a collective community that is united together. And we're going to be looking at some really interesting case studies from across the rare space of people who are doing this, who've done this, and are creating frameworks to make it easier for others to do that and make it more sustainable into the future. So I'm really excited to hear what our speakers have to say today. So alongside me, we've also got Rick, our CEO, in the room today as well, and he's going to be chiming in every so often and also talking to you in just a tiny short while with his own presentation, a very exciting one. So I'll hand over to him in a second. And I'd also just love to show you some of the faces of the speakers who are joining us today if you haven't seen them yet. These are going to be joining us a bit later and talking to us about some really exciting things that they've been doing in this space. So without further ado, I would love to pass over to Rick, Nick and Tony, and they're going to be talking to you a little bit more about that rebrand that I brought up right at the start of this and why we've decided to become Beacon and what that means for the future of our charity and also what direction that's going to take us in. So with that, I'll hand over to Rick now.
Thank you so much, Phil. Guys, it's lovely to be here today. I'm really excited about the event. A little stressed, but you know, it's all going great so far and I hope you're enjoying it. Now I get the fun part of trying to share my screen, make sure that's all functioning. So hopefully you can see the slides. So yeah, basically I'm here to tell you about Beacon, about our organisation, and to share that stage with our two co-founders, Nick and Tony, who are going to take you through some of the journey that's led us to this point. For those of you who hadn't managed to listen carefully to what Phil's saying already or paid attention to all the social media, there is a big news story in town today. That is that Find a Cure, the organisation I've been with since 2015, has made a decision to change name and become Beacon for Rare Diseases. This is something we've been working on for over a year now, and it's great to finally have it official and out live in the world. The questions that are going to pose for you guys in the audience are probably two. One is why, and the other is what is Beacon. I'm going to try and really answer the first question by answering the second consistently for the next 5-10 minutes or so. The simple answer to what is Beacon, for those of you that know Find a Cure and our history, is really straightforward. It's a new name for the same team, the same set of projects, and the same broad drive, but hopefully a name that helps to more clearly encompass and clarify our mission, our purpose to you guys and the community out there in the rare disease world. That simple answer, though, is kind of dull and not engaging to the rest of our audience here that are new. So I'm going to never give the easy answer and dive into things in a bit more detail right now. Simply, Beacon is a charity, and that's worth stating. We're a charity based in the UK, and we're here to help the world of rare diseases in whatever way we can. But again, that's not the most engaging. When I think about what Beacon is, what I think it comes down to me is Beacon is about people. Beacon is about the people who make up the team, who we've already introduced you to you today. There are 8 of us now, which is a heady number, but it's more than just that core team that do the work day to day. It's also the community of advisors we have supporting us, our board of trustees who help us think through the strategic moves we're going to make as an organisation. And crucially, our advisory committees, like our patient group engagement committee, you can see here, who really give us key insights into what's happening, what's important in the rare disease world for patient groups in particular. But again, that's really not encapsulating it enough. Beacon is actually, hopefully, a community, a rare disease community of a whole range of different people, different backgrounds who are focused on trying to make a difference for rare diseases, or at least interested in rare diseases. So Beacon is in many ways you guys out there in the audience, and that's what we're trying to aspire to. And hopefully everyone as part of that audience, that community, is united by a really simple purpose, a purpose that we don't want anybody living with a rare condition to face that journey alone. There should be no rare journey alone. We no longer want to see this age-old story of someone waiting years for a diagnosis and receiving it as a printout from Google and being told, we don't really know anything more than this. This is what we've got, go home and cope with it. That is isolating, that is lonesome, and that's not something that we should be seeing today. We no longer want to see the isolating experience for people living with rare diseases where they just never see a chance, never see a hope of any kind of treatment that can modify their disease in some way, or even just manage their symptoms. We no longer want to see situations where people with rare conditions, just through a quirk of genetics or fate, whatever you want to call it, struggle to hold down paid employment, or struggling to access the support that society should give them, or education. These are isolating things that are unfair and make that rare experience lonely, and something we're trying to stop as an organisation. What we know, though, crucially in the work we're doing, is that patient groups are the vehicle that's going to drive this change and has been driving this change for years. Patient groups are the people that are connected and connect other people with patients together, so they support each other. They are the first place many patients go to actually meet someone else with their rare condition. Patient groups provide the driving force to get research moving. They can instigate it and they can keep it moving so that it stays on focus, on target to deliver treatments to those people that need them. And they can really advocate in a meaningful way for change for their rare condition. And that's fundamental because they understand what the condition is. They understand what it means to live with their rare condition day in, day out. And that's something that no one else can ever really bring in the rare disease space. And it's because of this that they provide that impetus for change. But the reality for many of these patient groups that we've seen over the last 9 years or so in operation is that the majority are run by volunteers. They're run in the spare time, in between a full-time job, in between full-time caring, in between full-time just living day to day with whatever symptoms patients might be experiencing. As such, they tend to have little resources, whether that's time or money. And often when these groups start, they lack fundamental knowledge of the charity sector or the life sciences sector. But regardless of all this, they actually do an amazing job consistently. They find ways to instigate new care pathways, to start rare disease registries, to simply bring patients together, to run conferences, to move the needle forward in their rare disease sector. What we want to do as Beacon is be here to help those patient groups. We want to be here to help you be you, to do whatever it is you need to do as an organisation. To do that, we've got 3 major strands of work. And the one that most of you will be familiar with and see day in, day out is our patient group training. And this is all about finding ways to help patient groups to form, to grow, and to move towards professionalisation, to help them do the things that patient group needs to do, whether it's raising awareness or getting research ready, whether it's forming as a charity. And we deliver this training in a whole range of different ways. That might be live or on demand. It might be in person or online. It might be a single session you ever attend, or a year-long guided programme where you engage with people across that whole period. Our focus is trying to find ways to provide useful information to you guys in a way that helps you do your job. Alongside this, we try and work in the rare research field, finding ways to collaborate in projects where possible to push things forward, advocating for drug repurposing wherever possible, but primarily trying to support and promote a patient-centered approach to research, to showcase excellence that's happening in that rare research and help people learn from what's going on out there. And finally, and probably most importantly around our new name, our new identity, is this idea of community. We really want to focus on building a united, diverse, rare disease community that has patient groups at its heart. What this is all about is finding ways to connect people who wouldn't otherwise be connected and to build a more powerful force behind rare diseases as a collective. And every project that we're doing, whether it is running a webinar or talking about a rare disease podcast, whether it's a rare disease conference on drug repurposing or an essay competition, at its heart, we're trying to find ways to connect people, whether patient groups, students or industry, together to share their knowledge about rare diseases and learn from each other. And that is fundamentally the reason why we have chosen the name Beacon. A beacon should hopefully light the way for those patient groups, provide them a guiding light, guide them on the journey that they're trying to take to wherever they want to be. It should hopefully work to draw people together around a common purpose. And that is the reason we've made this change. We're really excited about it, and we hope it gives a strong message to everyone out there about why you should engage with us and how we can help you. But what's important now, obviously, is not just what we're going to do next, but how we got here. What is our history and what is the journey we've been on? And at this stage, I'd love to hand over to my 2 co-founders, two founders of the charity, Nick and Tony. So tell us a bit more about our history. So Nick, please, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Rick, for that introduction. So I'm Nick. I am the chair and the co-founder of Beacon, formerly Find a Cure, along with Tony. And the journey really started for me 21 years ago when my first son was diagnosed with the ultra-rare disease alkaptonuria, AKU, also known as black bone disease. Then my second son was diagnosed 3 years later, and we knew of no treatment. There was no patient group. There was really nothing much happening anywhere in the world for this ultra-rare genetic disease, which would become severely debilitating as life progressed. And when we joined forces with a patient and a doctor to set up the AKU Society 19 years ago, we had to learn everything from scratch: how to fundraise, how to work with academia, how to work with clinicians, how to identify patients, because we only knew of 4 at the time in the whole world, and 2 of them were my kids. How to work with industry, you know, all that kind of stuff we had to learn from scratch. And fortunately, it went well, but it took a long time. Okay. And in 2010, 2011, things started to pick up when we had a big grant from the European Commission to develop a drug called nitisinone. And that was a steep learning curve. And that's when Tony came in. Tony, who I met at a World Orphan Drug Congress in November 2010. When I told him my story, he said, I really want to help. And we became very good friends. And 2 years later, when I started thinking about setting up FindACure, I joined forces with Tony, who was at the time mulling over an idea of setting up a not-for-profit drug development organization that he will talk about in a minute. And that was really the birth of FindACure. I was being called up nearly every week by patients, by parents of patients with ultra-rare diseases for which there was no patient group. And they were saying, what do we do? How do we do it? And rather than give them piecemeal organization, Tony and I thought it would be better to actually set up piecemeal information. Tony and I thought it'd be better to set up an organization that would do this consistently. And that's why in 2012, FindACure was born, okay? And over the past 10 years, we have been doing, you know, kind of trainings and peer mentoring and all kinds of things to try and build what we call these kitchen table groups. And these are often parents whose child has just been diagnosed. One of the parents will probably be looking after the child, so will have given up work. The other one will be working overtime to try and make ends meet. And at 11 in the evening, when the child's gone to bed and they've eaten and everything, they'll be like, you know, let's work on this patient group and how do we make it work? And rather than reinvent the wheel each time, what Beacon does is really, you know, teach them and help them and provide them with guidance on how to work with industry, how to do clinical trials, how to fundraise, what's the whole regulatory pathway and all that kind of stuff, basically. So this is really important. And so we're now entering a really new phase for Beacon, and that's why we've changed the name. But before going into that, I will hand over to Tony, who will explain also about his vision, his thoughts behind the whole FindACure Beacon adventure. Tony, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. So hello, everybody. Fantastic that you could join today. So I thought it would be hopefully interesting just for me to say just a little bit about how I got involved with FindACure right at the very start. And so this was really following on from the DeveloperCure projects that Nick mentioned, where we raised money from the European Commission to repurpose the drug nitisinone for alkaptonuria. And Nick was already working on his ideas for FindACure as a really sort of patient support charity. And I thought, well, could we really take things a step further and do actual drug repurposing through FindACure? You know, could we repeat this idea that we'd done with the DeveloperCure project and find more drugs that we could repurpose and raise money and then take them through, right the way through development and get a marketing authorization at the end of it. I guess we were a little bit sort of heady from the success of the DeveloperCure that we'd managed to raise money from that. But we set up FindACure development at that time as a kind of subdivision of FindACure and set about seeing how we could make this approach viable on a bigger scale. And I guess we had two sort of main challenges really at that point. The first was to identify viable drug repurposing candidates. Obviously, that's a prerequisite for starting any drug redevelopment program, drug repurposing program. And then the second was to try to identify ways that we could raise enough money to fund the development. And we actually thought that the first bit would be quite easy. We thought there would be loads of such drug repurposing candidates out there, but it was actually surprisingly difficult to identify suitable candidates that didn't require a huge amount of work just to get to the point where we could actually get into the clinic and start some clinical trials. So that already made it quite difficult to get started, because obviously if you have to fund a lot of preclinical work or something already before you can go into the clinic, then that really puts you back several years and you already need to raise a lot of money in order to do that. So I guess that was the first sort of big challenge. The second challenge, of course, came perhaps as expected in how do we raise money to fund this kind of development. And so, of course, there are these big EU grants. There are a few other big grants around, but the lead time for these is rather long. And in the meantime, you still need to cover a lot of costs. And so that makes it quite difficult to fund development in that way. I mean, again, we were really lucky with DeveloperCure because it just all fell into the place with the charity that Nick was running at the time. And so we started looking at other mechanisms as well, social impact bonds, and there is actually some information about social impact bonds on our website. But again, after exploring that for a while, we decided that wasn't really the best way forward. So we have, however, had one or two successes along the way. So we are currently involved in a Horizon 2020 project, which is a project to repurpose the drug carbamazepine for a rare bone disease called MCDS. And we've also, something that Rick will talk about a little bit later, we've also been successful very recently with another EU-sponsored program to develop a drug repurposing platform. So we decided at that stage that perhaps the whole trying to fund drug repurposing was perhaps a bit overambitious, and decided to focus more on the patient support side. And of course, a key element of Find a Cure has always been really to put patients and the patient voice at the heart of research. And so we came up with this idea to publish the book. So hopefully some of you would have read that, the Patient Group Handbook. It's called A Patient Group Handbook, a Practical Guide for Research and Development. And you can find it on Amazon. I think the Kindle version is free. If you want a printed version, there's a small cost to cover the printing costs, but the Kindle version, I think, is still free. And the idea behind this was to have, I think we have 25 chapters in there, and we wanted to try to cover all the elements that a small patient group would need to be able to get off and start driving research. So very much aligned with the whole philosophy of Find a Cure, very much aligned with the workshops that we've been running over the years and which are very successful, and with the materials that are also on our website. Now, there's a lot of materials on that website now. So I think for drug repurposing, we've been quite successful, thanks to Rick and the Find a Cure team. And so we've really been, I think, quite successful in helping to push forward this agenda for drug repurposing and bring it up as a high profile and worthwhile thing to do. And we'll certainly continue to do that in the future as Beacon. So I hand back to Rick now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tony. Nick, did you want to say anything else on the future side of Beacon?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's a really good time at the moment for Beacon. The whole rebrand is about giving kind of new impetus, and also the name itself conjures ideas of kind of lighting the way and hope and all those kinds of things, which is why we decided on this particular name. But I think the two areas that we work on are the kind of patient group support that is growing and will continue to grow. I think a lot of it also is working with other groups such as IRDiRC or Genetic Alliance, and different groups in the UK, Europe, around the world, and really building this rare disease social movement that has been happening over the past decade or two, and which is growing now. Which I think, was more difficult during the whole pandemic and the lockdowns, but I think now we're starting to pick up again, and Beacon is really going to be at the center of that, working with the others, driving it forwards and trying to help more and more patients set up their groups and build their capacity and grow and really advocate for their needs and what they want to do. And then on the drug repurposing, as Tony just said, there are going to be some big announcements from Beacon on this, some very exciting work. Drug repurposing is a place that is full of hope, but also full of challenges, due to the nature of these drugs, which are often generic, etc. So what we're going to see there is a big move forward, so we're really excited. We think the timing of the name change is absolutely perfect. And this would not have been possible, obviously, without the whole team at Beacon who did all this work, but also our trustee, Andy Milligan, who's one of the world's leading branding experts, who has helped us so much through this. And of course, through Costello, Sophie Costello and her team at Costello Medical, who have really helped through all this. So a big thanks to all of them. Rick, back to you.
Thanks so much, Nick. And yeah, I just think it's really worth thanking all the team for the work they've done to get us through this rebrand, and particularly the team at Costello and Andy to help us putting this all together. I'm just going to wrap up now with a couple of points. I think in changing the name, we really want to use this as a way to focus on the success we've had and what we're going to build on. And I'm really proud of some of the work we've been able to do in the last 9 years or so as Find a Cure in the time I've been here. We've delivered over 30 different training workshops or patient groups in that time, which is a really big number and a huge breadth of training delivered. Over 80 different mentoring relationships have been established during our mentoring program, and many more to come. In our last empowerment year, which ran from 2020 to 2021, we supported over 160 different patient groups, and we're seeing that number grow from outside the UK too, which is brilliant to aid that collaboration between patient communities across the world. This event, in our 2020 virtual Rare Disease showcase, we saw over 315 attendees attend live, and as we've already heard, over 550 registered for the event today. Is really exciting to help build and nucleate that community that we're trying to push forward at Beacon, and a huge amount of that done with a really small staff team who are hugely committed to the work we're doing. What that means for the future then, who knows, but we've got a few ideas and plans. As Nick said, we're really keen to drive forward and work more in partnership with other umbrella organisations and rare disease groups in the UK and beyond to try and make sure we've got a really coherent message between us and utilise the resources we have at our disposal to be better for the patient community. We want to support more patient groups, more individuals with more tailored training, more specific, bespoke solutions to the problems that you're facing. We want to really help connect our really strong UK patient group base with the wider world and vice versa to make sure we're seeing international patient group collaborations. And we're really aware that it's hard for these patient groups to take that step into professionalisation, to find that first person on a payroll, that transition can really drive those groups forward. So hopefully in the next few years, we can find a way to help provide more resources to groups so they can do that. It's a real challenge we're keen to push on. And as Nick and Tony have mentioned, we literally heard yesterday that an EU grant that we're a collaborator on has been funded successfully. So we'll be doing hopefully a lot more work on repurposing through a new collaborative project called Ready for All. If you'd like to hear more about that, then please check out the breakout session sometime tomorrow led by Anton Usi from the IRDiRC, who can give you more insights into repurposing on a European level. It's really exciting times. So thank you, Nick and Tony, for giving your view on the history of our organisation and the direction. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be really happy to take any brief questions before we move on to the rest of our excellent speakers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rick, Nick and Tony. And I know the rest of the Beacon team is super excited as well. This week has been a crazy one and we're all just like, woo! So it's really exciting to pass that along to you on this platform and bring you in to all the positive things that are happening at the moment. So without further ado, I think it's time to kick off with some of our other speakers for today for this session, Beyond Borders. And I would love to introduce to the stage Lara Bloom, who is CEO of the EDS Society. And she's going to be talking about the power of patient engagement and global collaboration, and some work that she's been doing on this topic recently. So Lara, over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen with you all. Hopefully you will be able to see it. Here we go. And just a thumbs up if it's the right way round from someone. Beautiful, thank you. Okay, well, congrats to all the team. What an exciting day. And I'm so honored to be able to be presenting at this event, and I wish you all the luck in the world with your new rebrand. And I'm really excited because, as you can see, I'm a big fan of global and especially global collaboration, and I'm going to be talking about it today through the lens of patient engagement. So I have no conflicts to declare, but I have just listed out here all the things that I am working with, the organizations I'm working with, and the things I'm working on. So if anyone has any questions at all about any of these, my contact details are at the end of the presentation and you can ask me more. So some of you may have seen at the start of my slide that I was very, very lucky to be appointed a professor of practice at Penn State College of Medicine based in the US in March 2020. And that came after a decade of working in the field of rare diseases, and they marked that with this appointment. And it was the first of its kind. And I think huge props to Penn State for creating this appointment and giving me the opportunity to become even more expert in this area, but also seeing the importance of patient engagement through a global lens. And that has led to many collaborations and lots of work. I had the honor in November, when the travel ban was finally lifted, of going out there and lecturing to an in-person class, which was fantastic. And I'm actually going to be based there for 3 months this year, doing some more lecturing and talking to all the students there. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And I'm very, very grateful to Penn State College of Medicine for making that possible. But I hope it also gives people hope and inspiration that these positions are available and that this is becoming increasingly more important. This led actually to me being a lead author in a paper which was titled "The Power of Patient-Led Global Collaboration" in the American Journal of Medical Genetics at the end of last year. And what that did was really talk about all the reasons why patient engagement is so critical. And we know we talk about it, it's a buzzword, it's a tick box, but it is so much more than that. And I think that I have the confidence that most people realize that now, because there has been a real push over the last few years to ensure that patients are seen as equal stakeholders, that they're involved from conception, bench to bedside, and every step in between. And they need to really be involved in all of the things you see here and more: the activities, the sharing, the evaluation, the innovation, vision, governance, insights. Because without a patient at the center of everything, then there's no narrative, there's no reason, there's no why. And for so long, it was seen as a tick box. It was seen as something to do, something for patients to review at the end of a study, at the end of a program. And that was just completely the wrong way around. And I think another thing to consider is the word patient. For so long, we've worked so hard to make these understood terms: patient expert, patient engagement. But now there's a bit of a shift to moving away from always assigning that title with a person impacted by a condition, because they're so much more than a patient. Truly, you're only a patient when you're in front of a doctor in that kind of setting. So we're actually trying to think much more about using the term community member, person impacted by a condition, and using that word patient only when it's really relevant. Problem with that is that we've worked so hard to make these understood terms. So I think there's a little bit of a struggle there and a conflict. And I'm really enjoying the process of listening to people's thoughts and views about whether actually that term doesn't offend them or not, whether they actually enjoy being known as a patient expert, whether patient engagement makes them feel included and involved, or whether we need to start rethinking it, which would be a shame for awareness, but very, very important if we haven't got it right. So I kind of leave that hanging in the air with no conclusion, other than I think it's an important moment to start to consider these terms and the use of patient in this context. And you can see here that we've really taken that on with something called our EDS and HSD Community Coalition. And I'm giving you now some examples of ways that we have really included the community members, those impacted by a condition, in different coalitions and groups, so that I can show you how we've done it in real life examples. So this is our community coalition. And it was actually this group that was at the center of the paper that I wrote that was in the American Journal of Medical Genetics. And we brought together this group after a grant given from PCORI that was tasked for us to look at research priorities through the lens of the patient, patient-led priorities. And PCORI is patient-centered outcomes research initiative. So that really was in line with what they were looking at. And we spent a year trying to identify what the priorities are. We started with about 90 and we managed to get it down to 3. And I'm really delighted to say that 2 of those 3 have been funded and have been started as research studies. And that 3rd one, we're still looking for funding. But this was really successful. It was so successful that an individual donor continued the funding to make this continue. And it started off named the Comorbidity Coalition because it was really looking at the comorbidities related to EDS and HSD. But it's become so much more than that, that we expanded the name to Community Coalition. And this really is our stakeholder group, comprised of people impacted by the condition, doctors, other representatives from patient organisations from all around the world. So it's a wonderful example of that global collaboration involving the patient expert, the person impacted by the conditions. And that's not always the person living with it. That can be a caregiver, parent, sibling, partner. And we have those as well included in this coalition. Another example is our AHEAD coalition. Now, we brought this group together for a roundtable looking at paediatric concerns in EDS and HSD, because we know that there is a lot of FII and child abuse cases that are incorrectly handled, and unfortunately lots of children are being taken away from their parents, and it's really terribly heartbreaking and very, very sad. And what we're trying to do is raise awareness and education of people trying to think about EDS and HSD when these cases are presented. So we established this AHEAD coalition, the Action for Infants, Children and Young People with HSD and EDS for an accurate diagnosis. And that again has people at the heart of it impacted by this condition, other organisations, judiciary, clinicians, researchers. And what we're working on is a new criteria, a paediatric criteria. We're also looking at unconscious bias in this group and trying to put together a paper looking at these examples. So this again is a wonderful way of demonstrating how much can be done and achieved when you really bring the people impacted it into the heart of what you're discussing. Then we have our International Consortium on EDS and Related Disorders. And this was set up back in 2016 when we were looking to do the new publication on the diagnostic criteria and management and care guidelines. There hadn't been an update in the diagnostic criteria for 20 years. And all of the people, all the health professionals really wanted to do it, but they were missing the administrative and facilitation support to enable to put together such a broad scope of work. So that is why originally the Ehlers-Danlos Society was launched. It was to facilitate the work of this independent group of health professionals, the consortium, to come together to work on the diagnostic criteria, which led to publication in 2017 with 90 authors from around the world in lots of different disciplines and 18 papers in the American Journal of Medical Genetics. And it was a groundbreaking paper to show how collaborative you can be and how much gets done when you do it through that lens. And we started off with half the working groups you see here and about 85 people, as I mentioned. We're now at about 170 people with working groups in all the different types of EDS and HSD and all the different comorbidities. And they are still working right now collaboratively on lots of different efforts. We're working on common data elements, resources for our websites, new publications, literature reviews, and they come together at least once a quarter, working together on these different needs that are related to that specific area of medicine. And it's incredible. It's wonderful to see. You have people on calls in the middle of the night, early in the morning because of the time zone barriers, but it just shows the strength of what can be achieved when you break down the silos and fragmentation and you work together through a global lens, really thinking about the bigger picture. And that really is at the heart of all we are doing at the Ehlers-Danlos Society. And we're driven largely by this quote and reminded day by day of its importance, that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Since we launched in 2016, more has been achieved for EDS and HSD than ever before. More publications, millions of dollars in research, a global registry, a huge collaborative research effort to try and find the genetic causes behind hypermobile EDS, and more. Project ECHO, EDS ECHO was launched to telementor and educate people in EDS and HSD, so you move knowledge and not patients. There's just so much that can be achieved when you come together. So that's why I'm so excited to hear about the announcement today, and I wish you all the luck in the world. If you have any questions about anything I've spoken about today, please reach out to me. You can see my individual details here and also those of the organisation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lara. It's really interesting to hear you bringing these debates about the language that you use to the forefront as well, which obviously was part of us renaming to Beacon, but also something that I think we're going to see more and more as we really delve into what actually patient engagement and centricity means in practice to the patients and to the individuals living with rare diseases. So thank you, Lara, and I'm sure we'll have some really interesting questions for you at the end. And next, I would love to introduce Samantha Barker, who's joining us from IRDiRC, and I'm sure she can explain that acronym better than I can, so I'm going to leave that up to her. And she's going to be talking on accelerating medical breakthroughs for people with rare diseases by the establishment of an international network. So welcome to the main stage, Samantha.
Thank you very much. I think you can hear and see me. And
I can indeed.
I want to share my screen. Okay, can I have a confirmation that you can see my screen?
Yeah, so it just needs to go into full screen mode, Samantha.
Is that good?
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to explain the acronym IRDiRC other than when it was invented back a number of years ago. I think everybody agreed that it wasn't the best acronym, but it was the most appropriate for what we wanted to do. So I'd like to, following on from the last speakers, I feel absolutely amazing talks, and thank you so much for inviting us here. I'm honoured to be able to give this talk. So my name's Sam Barker. My employment is at IRDiRC, which is a biotech company focused on rare diseases. We're focused actually on developing gene therapy for rare bone disorders. And I'm Chief Patient Access Officer. So I note the comment from Lara about the patient, the name of patient, and I agree in that role. I think there's really some thought that we need to go into and how we use that word, and if there's a better word. But today I'm presenting IRDiRC, so it's the International Rare Disease Research Consortium, and I've been honoured to have been nominated on the 1st of January vice chair of this group, and the chair is David Pierce from Sanford. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background and history, because I think history is important in understanding where we are today. And I was lucky enough, actually, through some of the European Commission funded projects, I was involved in some 7th framework and different Horizon 2020 work. And because of that, was invited to a meeting in 2010, which was being organised by the NIH and the European Commission. And they sat down. They realized that there was a fundamental understanding that there was a need to be able to coordinate research and the way that projects were being funded, and work that was being sort of interdisciplinary work that was being doing throughout research that needed to be shared. And at that meeting, what I want to do in this presentation, I think, it's great seeing all these big initiatives that are ongoing, but it's also really important how to understand that every person can have a take home and a learning, and there's really practical things that you can get from this, as well as much longer term and fundamental changes in the way that we do things. And that was exactly what happened to me in this meeting, because we were there to think about the future, to think about some of the problems that were happening in research, but at the same time, during that small meeting, I was able to meet with somebody from the FDA, with somebody doing some research that I was interested in the company that I was working for at the time. And we actually set up an international registry that the regulatory authorities had agreed would be sufficient to be able to do our post-marketing safety and efficacy surveillance. And my company agreed to piggyback all of that. And so what I want to say here is that there's very sort of practical examples that we can all use, as well as this more sort of overarching goal of the organization. So that was 2010 was the initial first meeting to think about and where the name came from. And in 2011, IRDiRC was officially launched with an objective around diagnostics of rare diseases, and also with an ambition to facilitate and accelerate drug development in rare diseases with a goal of 200 new therapies by 2020. In 2012, it started expanding its membership. So it was open calls, and it's all about nomination in order to be able to participate in some of the different groups. In 2015, a very important milestone, I believe, in IRDiRC was the way it established, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on how the consortium works, but the establishment of task forces that will independently be able to tackle specific issues that were raised by the consortium. In 2017, having achieved that initial goal that was felt to be very ambitious at the time, the goal then became more ambitious. And by 2027, the overall vision is to enable all people living with a rare disease to receive an accurate diagnosis, care, and available therapy within 1 year of coming to medical attention. You know, I agree that those are very, very ambitious goals, and it's not just cause effect that only IRDiRC existing means that this happens, but it really is a facilitator for those goals. And today IRDiRC's tripled in size from 2011. It works by peer-reviewed publications, and I want to show some people on this meeting how to access those publications, recommendations, and guidelines. And it's driving force. You know, I was very happy to hear the talk about Beacon, but it's the people, and it's the sharing of that collective intelligence in what we all agree, and we have to agree when you decide to be in rare, if you decide when you're working in rare diseases, collaboration and feeling that that's a non-competitive space is absolutely essential to moving the field forward. So I've mentioned the vision. So that vision, in order to be able to achieve that, 3 goals has been set by the organization. The first goal is that all patients coming to medical attention with a suspected rare disease will be diagnosed within 1 year if their disorder is known and in medical literature. And then there's also a whole thought process and work ongoing in IRDiRC to how also be able to coordinate those that have undiagnosed conditions, that they can also be able to be included in the system. 1,000 new therapies for rare diseases will be approved, and the majority of which will focus on diseases without approved options. And that's also a personal thing of mine as well, is that there's some, we talk about rare diseases, you know, some are extremely rare, and access to therapies is more complex because clinical trials are more complex. And thinking about how we can do that is really a big goal for IRDiRC and a lot of people's personal goals as well. And then also the third goal is to develop methodologies that will help assess the impact of diagnosis and therapies on those rare disease patients. So just a little bit on the organization. The IRDiRC consortium is all around, as I mentioned, collaboration, stimulation, and coordinating. And it has 3 main groups, or 4 main groups, but it has the research funders. So the research funders, by that I mean NIH, the European Commission, people that invest into research in rare diseases. And also those companies are also classified as funders because we are investing considerable amounts into develop medications for rare diseases. Those funders, it's not new money, and it's not money that goes specifically into IRDiRC goals, but it's money that we're already investing. But by coordinating that, you ensure that you're making best use of it. We also have groups, so there's 16 umbrella patient advocate groups, and there's also scientific committees, and those scientific committees, there's 3 of them that are focused on diagnostics, therapies, and an interdisciplinary committee. And as I mentioned earlier, we then break down into task forces and working groups, and I'll give a little bit more data on how that works. So again, I'm not going to run through every member here, but I think again saying earlier and you know, also how a lot of these organisations, what makes them work. IRDiRC, probably its greatest strength, and I'm quoting actually this is not my quote, this comes from Anne Parissé from the NIH, but our greatest strength is our ability to influence. And you can see a lot of members, and just to, not that anybody's more important than anybody else, but you have the FDA here, you have NORD as a member, you've the NIH, the European Commission, obviously IRDiRC, AFM, INSERM, so really big players in rare disease research from the different communities that I mentioned earlier, companies, funders, and also patient organizations and scientists, and we sit around that table. And what we do around that table is, again, we think, what's the vision, what are our goals, and how do we achieve those? And 5 different actions or themes have been bucketed, as if you would like, so that we can better structure the task forces and working groups. And those 5 themes, in order to achieve these goals, are around shortening the diagnostic journey, developing new therapies, fostering clinical research, stimulating multi-stakeholder engagement, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about, beyond, I mean, we all know each other very well. I've known Nick now for 20 years, I think. So I think it's that long. But so we're small, but how you reach out to a much wider community as well, and access to care methodologies. This is a very busy slide. I'm actually going to have a look at another screen because even I can't read it when it's so small. But I'm not going to go into every single activity. What I do want to do is go into a few and give practical examples of how this can be used by different communities in order, as I said earlier, to reach common goals. In grey is the work that's already been completed. And we've structured this slide so that you can see these are all the task forces and working groups that sit under specific themes that may reach over several goals or really be specifically involved in one particular goal. So as you can see, matchmaker exchange things, I've got a slide on, so I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail. It sits in how we can shorten that diagnostic journey for families in this space. And then we have, again, I'll go into a little bit more detail of some of the work that's been done, because I just think it's, as a person that's involved in drug development, there's some really practical, useful information and guidance out there to help speed up the way that we do research. And that was the Orphan Drug Development Guidebook, and I'll go into a little bit more detail as well. So without walking through everything, I think you can see the amount of work that's been completed at IRDiRC, and all of these, as I've said, are published in peer-reviewed journals. This is the projects and the task forces that are ongoing at the moment to reach those goals and sitting again within those different themes. And we're starting new work, so we have this continual future at IRDiRC where we're often identifying new areas that we need to be able to set up to be able to help that research. So just to go into a few examples, I wanted to discuss, so as I said, in the theme of developing new therapies and a specific task force that was created called the Orphan Drug Development Guidebook. So this is all online accessible, and you have the website address here. Now, I've used this, or I'm using this at the moment. I think it really is a fantastic tool. And to give an example, you may be at a particular stage in drug development as driven by academia, patient organizations, or small companies. You may be thinking regulatory is always changing its pathway. What's the best pathway for the specific technology that you're looking at and the specific geography that you're interested in the area, in the point that you are in your development? And so you can go in, you can see different building blocks, and it has a whole load of set of regulatory building blocks, and you can click into a particular geography and it will be able to list with expert advice on different regulatory conversations that you can have with different authorities when the timing would be right, that then you can make a bespoke pathway for your own particular drug. I wanted to give that example because it's particularly interesting. I think depending on where you are in your research, you might find other areas of this guide useful. There's also been, and again, really practical. This is one of the first publications that came out of IRDiRC, which was on model consent clauses. And this is just so practical. If you are writing an informed consent for a natural history study, and you automatically, we're working in very rare disease, we have to think about collaboration and sharing. You know, how am I going to share that data at the end? I do not own that data. I am custodian of that data, but how can I ensure that it would be able to get out in the community? One of the first things that we need to be able to do is ensure that the families that are generously committing their time to go into natural history studies are informed potentially that we might want a broader consent to be able to research with to be able to share with other research groups. And that has to all go through different ethical committees and be approved IRBs. And so this publication really just has, you know, it provides the wording that you can actually include in ICF. So I think this was, again, a really practical example of something coming out of IRDiRC. The small population clinical trials, again, this is an extremely used publication. And I think as well, you know, this can be taken further as well in how already we have some great guidance when you're thinking that you can make, again, this kind of bespoke methodology for your particular research field. But as well, I think IRDiRC, because of the people that are involved in IRDiRC, you can go beyond that and think as well, how can this type of work then be embedded into regulatory thought process as well, and how drugs are approved. We also have, and this is absolutely essential, again, Lara very beautifully presented the role of the community and the families in research today. And you know, I think this is something that's been a learning process. I've been in the field for 25 years in rare diseases, and certainly we weren't thinking this way 25 years ago. But today, at very early stages of drug development, in the preclinical stage, you have to be involving communities and understanding what is their unmet need, and will the drug meet that unmet need? How can we translate from what we're seeing in the preclinical to ensure that those are the things that we're looking at? And so there's been a lot of work on patient-centered outcome research within IRDiRC as well that's publicly available. And again, I've provided the references. I mentioned earlier shortening the diagnostic journey, and I think again we hear constantly very hard and long pathways for families in order to be able to get a diagnosis. So this has been a core part of the work at IRDiRC, where, for example, the Matchmaker Exchange, where it's been a network that's allowed by genomic matchmaking and similar phenotypes, it's been allowed that exchange to be able to shorten that pathway. So in summary, IRDiRC is very much recognized as an original and influential initiative, uniting those major stakeholders, and we're global. One of the things, you know, I did on that map slide, we're predominantly North America and Europe, Asia also, and I think there is work as well to continue to do to be able to reach out to be completely integrated and as global as we can be. We facilitate progression and collaboration of research in rare disease. And the way that we work is providing policies, recommendation, guidelines, and resources. And I hope I've guided you to some resources that can be helpful. And also very happy that you reach out to any one of us at IRDiRC if you require additional information. And I think I've been asked to finish on the last slide, because we've just had a publication that comes out that summarizes the 10 years of progress. And again, it will show some of the other task forces and results that I didn't have the time to be able to present today. So thank you very much. And I don't know if we have questions or I stop there.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Actually, there is a question that's come through just for you, if I'm going to ask you that now. Hopefully you can hear me. I haven't got the little green box around me. But So somebody's asked, what is the consortium's vision for patient group involvement in research, and how do the patient group members currently engage?
That's a great question. So patient organisations have always been a fundamental part of IRDiRC, and were at the very, very first meeting equally represented. It tends to be with some of the umbrella organisations. So we have, I don't have under my eye right now all the different groups. Obviously, we had IRDiRC, and NORD. And what we do want is that, so the patient organisations are amongst the consortium and the strategic vision of IRDiRC, but each task force absolutely must have the participation and working group and be well represented by patient organisations as well. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Samantha. And I think it's probably about time that we move on to the next speaker so that we can have a few questions at the end as well. So if you want to keep putting those into the discussion board, that's great, and we'll get those answered for you. So I would love to introduce now to the main stage Kattya from DEBRA International, and she's going to be talking about how global collaboration can make a difference in the clinical and social care of rare disease patients, and some of the work that they've done at DEBRA International to assure that global collaboration is at the forefront. So over to you, Kattya.
We are DEBRA International, the world's leading EB patient support and advocacy network. I would like to thank you for inviting us to present today. I feel very honored and very privileged to hear your announcements as well, and we wish you luck. Stronger together. This is one of our mottos, and we hope today to present and to demonstrate how global collaborations can make a difference in the clinical and social care of rare disease patients. I am Kattya Mayre-Chilton, the Clinical Practice Guideline Coordinator for DEBRA International. DEBRA International is an umbrella organization for a worldwide network of autonomous, non-governmental patient support and research funded entities. Their collective goal is to increase the quality of life of those living with epidermolysis bullosa or EB. They achieve this by doing two things in parallel: by providing services for those with EB and funding innovative science directed at symptom relief and systemic cure. The first DEBRA group was funded in the United Kingdom in 1978 by a group of parents whose children had EB. From these humble origins, DEBRA has grown significantly and is now international in scope. Over the past 40+ years, we have seen the establishment of more than 50 national groups in countries around the world. Within a number of groups sharing common goals and working in common activities, it became more clear that they would achieve more working together than alone. The DEBRA Europe was established in 1992 to serve as a central body of the international network, made up of DEBRAs and other EB support groups as its members. The organization subsequently became DEBRA International in 2008 to reflect the ever-increasing international scope of its memberships. The key aim of DEBRA International is to coordinate, in collaboration with its network members, activities that are more for the benefit of everyone affected with EB globally. The international patient community, patient support, the advocacy groups, the healthcare professionals, researchers, and industry. Our vision is a world where anyone living with EB has the support from DEBRA groups in order to access clinical and social care. Our mission is to promote and coordinate international collaborations between parents, health social care professionals, researchers, NGOs, and national governments to improve the lives of those living with EB, while cures are found available for all EB subtypes. In order to achieve our vision and mission, our four main goals are to develop and support our international network of EB groups, to develop and promote the best practice for EB care, and increase professional knowledge of the condition, and to coordinate international research efforts to better understand EB, and to work closely with industry and institutes that are developing and commercializing symptom relief treatments and cures. I am going to be focusing on the development and promote best practice of EB care and increase professional knowledge in the condition. Since 2012, DEBRA International has taken the long-term initiative to develop clinical practice guidelines in EB in order to improve the clinical care of people living with EB. It is unusual to develop clinical practice guidelines or to be led by a patient-led organization. But in the case of rare diseases such as EB, it is unlikely that guidelines will be developed without the drive of patients. Despite being well placed to lead such an initiative, there has been some major challenges for DEBRA to address in order to ensure its future success. In the last 10 years, and with the help of over 300 clinical and patient volunteers, combined with funding from DEBRA groups, DEBRA International is one of the few patient organizations in the world coordinating the creation of best clinical practice guidelines. These guidelines are vital in providing international consistent standards of care. In the guideline development, the inclusion and involvement of patient and patient representative is an important attribute. DEBRA International's biggest advantage is that it's patient-led and has members representing all continents. The building of this specialized clinical practice guideline network, which includes clinical experts, researchers, and the EB community, is a key aspect to the development success. And we aim by maintaining this by ensuring that we have more than 20% representation by patients and the public within all guidelines. In the last decade, we have 12 current guidelines, which are addressing 12 clinical areas with it that affect EB. All of these guidelines are available open access so that anyone in the world can download them for free. 2 of these guidelines have been updated. All guidelines get updated to ensure that they follow current evidence, and this results in a guideline cycle of development process. Guidelines also drive and encourage research as they identify areas where there's no evidence or no knowledge. The information and recommendations from these guidelines are the basis of our patient versions, which have been specifically designed to be used by people who either have EB or their caregivers. Our EB Without Borders team is made up of volunteers from established DEBRA groups. The team operates in a global capacity, responding to requests for information and help from people affected by EB in countries where there is currently no DEBRA group and that there is little clinical knowledge on EB. The EB Without Borders team initiated the program to develop EB infographics for low resource settings to help people with EB, their families, and doctors in countries where there is no DEBRA. The information and recommendations of the guidelines are the basis for the EB resources and infographics to ensure that the key guideline recommendations remain consistent no matter where people live. The EB resources and infographics have been developed as a visual summary of the guidelines, and many of the DEBRA groups have engaged in translating these resources. The EB resources and infographics are more icon picture-based. Although they are targeted at people living in low resource settings, the information is still relevant to anyone living or caring for someone with EB anywhere in the world, as they can be used as a simple or quick reference guide on EB care. To further support the DEBRA groups, we also produced a second EB infographics called What is EB? This is an educational resource also available in Dutch and Brazilian Portuguese. In the last year, we've also produced a What is EB poster. This is an A1 poster covering key information about what is EB, the 4 main subtypes, common symptoms and complications, and how to care for a newborn with EB. Due to the demand from the EB community, we also developed a newborn with EB leaflet. This is a two-sided leaflet covering key information of what is EB and how to care for an EB baby. So these are resources that can easily be used in the case of the poster in several locations, such as the school, classroom, an office kitchen, a doctor's waiting room, an A&E area, or a neonatal unit. In the case of the leaflets, these are quick reference guides for parents with a baby recently diagnosed with EB, as well as a guide for the family, friends, or for non-EB health and social care professionals. We produced the EB card. It has been designed to help people with EB easily explain to anyone in their community what EB is and how it affects them or their child. On the back of the card, it provides key medical care information for health professionals looking after them who may not have treated someone with EB before. The card, the resources, the infographics, patient version, and guidelines can be downloaded for free from the DEBRA International website. So stronger together, I hope we have demonstrated that without the international EB collaboration and the patient drive, these essential resources could not have been possible. We'd like to thank and acknowledge this group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kattya. It's amazing to see the work that you're doing to really break down those borders, as we were saying, and reach those people who might not have tried to reach. But you're saying, no, we can provide them with help and resources. And I think that's really wonderful and a great thing for people in the audience to see as well. So thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
And last but of course not least, I would love to bring to the stage Sondra Butterworth from Rare Quality of Life. And she's going to be talking about Equality, Diversity and Inclusive Research Association and developing a framework for inclusive research for diverse rare disease communities. A very mouthy title there, Sondra, and I'm sure that it will be an absolutely wonderful presentation as always. So I'd love to pass over to you now to give that to our audience.
Thanks, Philippa. I'm just going to try and share my screen and do it properly, I hope. Share. Wonderful. And just move this over so that we can start sharing. Okay.
Perfect.
I am delighted to be here and to be invited by Beacon. And I'm loving the name, I have to say. In a post-COVID era, to have the name change, I think, is so appropriate and so fitting, and it's the right thing. So thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm Sondra Butterworth, and I am a community psychology specialist or community psychologist, and I am the founder of RareQoL, or Rare Quality of Life. And we are a small, very small social enterprise based in North Wales in the UK. And we were launched on the 4th of July, 2020. So we've been going for about 18 months. So we're really very new, but we are growing. And we have a number of different projects. And one of our latest projects, which we launched now this month, is IRDiRC, and it's grown legs actually very quickly. So we're really, really pleased about this. So what we've got is, it's an idea that came from when I was doing my PhD and from lived experience. I'm from a rare disease family and working with people with rare conditions and, you know, complex needs or other disabilities. And it's something that I am fully aware of through lived experience, that there are not many diverse rare communities that participate in research for a variety of different reasons. But the medical model of health and support and care, research, education, that's changing. I think Laura especially, some of the other speakers have alluded to this change, and there's been a shift from just focusing on the physical features of rare conditions to the psychosocial aspects of living with a rare condition for the person, but also for their family and the rare disease community as a whole. So IRDiRC, or Equality, Diversity and Inclusive Research Association, is around trying to bring together a diverse group of people to look at inclusive research, because it is a thing. Okay, right, so I will go on to the next. Right, so in the UK, there is the Rare Disease Framework, which was launched January last year. And as a result of that, one of the things that we did in RareQoL, in partnership with Medics for Rare Diseases, I think Lucy is here today, we had a campaign which we called Whose Voice Is It Anyway? And it's from something that I saw years ago. It was a film called Whose Life Is It Anyway? Richard Dreyfuss. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but it's a man who became paralyzed, wasn't able to move any of his limbs, and he wanted to live well, but also then to die well. And Whose Life Is It Anyway was about his journey to be heard. So Whose Voice Is It Anyway is in a similar vein. Okay, so IRDiRC was developed to address the gaps generally in research, which I mentioned earlier, and the gaps in the participation of diverse rare disease communities. Also, in direct response to the UK Rare Disease Framework, which sets out a coherent national framework about how the UK will improve the lives of those living with rare diseases. So that was the key aspect of IRDiRC. There is information on our website which gives you more background to this. Okay, so this is a direct quote from the Rare Disease Framework, and I've put this to be able to give you some of the context around IRDiRC. So this is a direct quote which says that we will ensure the patient voice remains central to the implementation of the framework. There will be an assurance that there is representation from those whose voices can often go unheard, including patients from Black and minority ethnic, or BAME, if you like that term or not, or disadvantaged backgrounds. So it's not all about the United Colours of Benetton, it's about differences around ethnicity, religion, disability, and so on. So thinking of inclusive research, advocates of inclusive research state that its central premise is that those who have in the past so often been mere objects of investigation themselves become the agents of their own transformation. And some of the speakers, and I know some people within the rare disease community, are manifestations of that. Very much within the rare disease community, the model is patient, family driven advocates who put together patient groups. So it's very much about taking ownership, being empowered, and transforming and changing the power balance. So that there's more of an equal partnership between the medical model of rare disease clinical practice and the psychosocial models of disease and rare disease practice. Because at the end of the day, the rare disease is not the person. We're social beings, we have jobs, careers, etc. So when you have an outcome, a patient, using the term, a patient outcome for the drug therapies, trials, etc., that might be the beginning of the trial or therapy and then the end, fine. But whose outcome is it? Whose voice is it anyway? Is it the outcome of the funders of that, the outcome of the pharmaceutical community, or is it the outcome of the patient or the person who's involved in that trial? So what I'm advocating is looking at a wider perspective as a community psychologist. You've got the person with the rare condition and their diagnostic journey before they got to the trial. So what was going on there, then the trial, and then what happens after? So it may be that the outcome measures that improve quality of life. It's not just about the efficacy of the drug. It means that this person can now get married, can now have children, can now go to university, could have an extended life or whatever. Okay. So one of the things that we do within RareQoL is we have a number of different projects, and the Rare Community Network is one project, which is the first project that we put together. And I think Beth Davenport, who is our lead, is on here. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Sorry, my phone went off then. Sorry about that. Sorry. Right, so the Rare Community Network is part of RareQoL. And I hope Beth is here as well. And what we've got is members, which we didn't see come in, but members from around the world. And you can see most of the members are from England, and then we've got some from Wales. Yay, that's where I am. And hopefully we want to expand on this, because I think one of the tragedies of COVID has been that people are isolated. But if you can see a positive in that, it means that the world has become smaller, it's shrunk, and we're able to communicate as we are today, globally, quite easily as well. Okay. The other aspect of the Rare Community Network is the ethnicity. So you can see that we're diverse, but with different backgrounds as well. And that comes along with the intersectionality, the intersection of the differences between all the other factors that we all live with. You know, we all have different features. That it might be that some of us may have disabilities from a different ethnic background, different religion, male, female, and so on. And those factors can form an intersection that can lead to health inequalities. And people within our Rare Community Network are people who have lived experience of this. And in terms of the disability, very often the medical model does not fit with people who live with disabilities. Get into a clinical trial that may be in the centre of London and they're wheelchair users, trying to use the tube, no chance. Just having an understanding that there are social impacts on living with a rare condition that people living with disabilities have an understanding of. So this is the basis of where we start. So we have the lived experience, the stories from our Rare Community Network and beyond that are fed into the IRDiRC project. So this is what we're doing. We actually have members now, yay, and we are going to start with our consultation. So the first of that is going to be at the beginning of March, so we've set some dates, and that's going to be talking with our Rare Community Network and the members of IRDiRC. And we have University of Chester, which are going to be the secretariat for IRDiRC, and we have in partnership with Chester, have applied for funding because we have no funding for this at all. It's run on hope and glory, that's all. Okay, so we're hoping that we will get some funding, but the aim is, regardless of funding, is to publish a paper that pulls together some of the consultation outcomes, and then dissemination. So consultation, publication, dissemination, and that is to key stakeholders or potential funders. And I feel within the dissemination, I get the fact that in the research community, you want some papers that have high impact factors, BMJ, etc. But then the average stakeholder of the rare disease community are not necessarily going to read that. So we have to think more globally about how we disseminate and interpret the findings so that the people that the research is about get to know the results of that research. So that's part of what we're going to be doing as well. So this is, in summary, it's a study. So this is just a sort of consultative exercise at the beginning of the study, is to develop a framework for inclusive research for rare disease diverse rare disease communities, sorry. The aim of our IRDiRC project is to bring together a diverse group of experts in the field of rare diseases, research ethics, intersectionality, and inclusive research. And then my final slide is the members of IRDiRC. Yes, so at the top, I'm co-chair with Dr. Andrew Mitchell, who is the Associate Professor at the University of Chester, and he has been instrumental in applying for the funding, haven't heard yet, and for getting Chester to be the Secretariat. And then the next row down are the advocates. So an EDI consultant from Wales, Beth, who I mentioned, or she's got a Sunday name up there, Beth, Elizabeth Davenport, don't you know? And then advocates and my good friend Shanley Pereira, who's a doctor turned patient. She now has a rare condition, so she is no longer able to practice as a doctor, but she is an advocate and a medical educator. And Lucy, I understand, is here today, so hopefully we can meet up later, Lucy. And then at the bottom, the academics. And I sent one email out to each of these academics asking if they would like to be involved, and they all responded by return, right, straight away back. Yes, please. And I'm delighted. So we've got our first meeting in March, and we will see what happens. Thank you and goodbye. That's the end.
Thank you so much, Sondra. It's always great to welcome you onto our stage, and it's great to I think it's great to hear you addressing these gaps that you've identified right at the source by, you know, actually bringing in that voice as the central thing. And I thought it was really interesting what you said about looking at what stakeholders you're actually trying to address this to, because there's no point having research written if no one's reading it, right? So I thought that was a really important thing that you brought up as well. And you're right, Lucy. Lucy is in the audience. I can see she's answering things in the chat, and she has a breakout session later. So if you are interested in how to engage healthcare professionals, go ahead and join that breakout. Me and Lucy will be in that later, and hopefully
I'll be going to that.
Be able to ask us some questions. So I'd love to bring back all of the speakers to turn your cameras on and unmute yourselves, so we can have a little bit of a Q&A session now with some questions that have been coming in from the audience. Great. I'm just going to change my view so I can see you all properly. So firstly, we've had a few questions about Brexit. So I thought we might start with those, get those out of the way, so to speak, and then move on to some other questions as well. So these might be best addressed to maybe Sam, but obviously if anyone has any input, then that's most welcome as well. So firstly, somebody's asked, will Brexit adversely affect potential funding for rare diseases? And I'm not sure if anyone feels well equipped to answer this question or not.
I can answer it, but not as a Brexit expert. But with our IRDiRC project, we were approached by a consortium or collaboration of European organisations who are doing a study, and they're applying for funding, and they wanted us to come on board as a partner with the IRDiRC project. So we said, is there any money? They said yes, so we said we're in. Okay, so what happened was I had to fill in an online form to be able to be partner, and I couldn't find the UK because I was looking under EU, but we're non-EU, so I had to find a separate section. I thought, oh, I wonder if this does affect funding because we're no longer part of EU, but it didn't. So we are able to be part of this European collaboration study. So from my perspective, for that particular study, it hasn't made a difference. That's all I know. Okay.
I just add from our experience, actually, it did impact it. But I think the way that it works is that you can't directly receive funding as a UK organisation, but the institution that applies, if it's based in the EU, can receive the funding and then send it out to you as a partner. So you can get it around that way. But it's definitely going to have an impact on collaborative proposals and funding for sure. We're actually thinking about whether we need to register legally in an EU country, because we're registered legally in the US and the UK. and now we're not able to easily apply for that kind of funding. So I think it will have a negative impact for those in the UK.
Yeah, that was another question as well that I thought I'd just peg on now as well, is if it does affect funding, like you just said, Lara, would setting up a charity in an EU country give greater access? And I don't know how much we know at this point, but if anyone wants to add that answer onto a subsequent one, that would be most welcome as well.
It would, if you were legally registered, then yes, you could then, but it's the governance and making sure you have the capacity to then run an organisation, because accounting will need to be done, reporting, you'll have to have a board, you have to be set up in exactly the same way in that country. And also what's always important to remember is when an organisation is legally registered in another country, legally, they are a completely different organisation. So if they wanted to, with your name and your branding, they could go off and do whatever they wanted in that name. Now, ideally, you would strategically place people in those roles that wouldn't do that, but actually legally they could. And so that is a very big risk to organisations and non-profits. So it's something to really be considered.
I was gonna jump in if it's possible, and it doesn't respond to the specific question about funding in rare diseases, but from an industry perspective and also from an IRDiRC perspective. So from an industry perspective, and I'm not to get into politics, but I'm certainly not trying to be pro. We're still. I think there was an initial concern about setting up clinical trials, and particularly things like gene therapy trials, where you're importing complex drugs as well. So there was initial concern. From my experience, it has not impacted our choice in setting up natural history studies and setting up clinical trials. And I think, you know, that's something that's really important, and a question that I often have from communities about accessing different studies. And so it hasn't impacted. From also, I just wanted to mention, because, you know, obviously regulatories had to set up independently, whereas before there was a lot of work, particularly in rare diseases, done through the EMA. And the MHRA, I'd just like to flag, I think they're doing a really great job. You know, in the you know, that kind of Brexit environment, they've been able to very rapidly set up innovative pathways to be able to work through for drug developers. I just wanted to give a thumbs up to what they're doing. I think it's great. And from IRDiRC and what you said, Lara, earlier about, you know, access to funding, I think that really is an issue. And I think, you know, having benefited from different European Commission funded projects as well, it's hard hit. From IRDiRC, we have, you know, obviously it's global, so it's not impacting the way people are working through IRDiRC as well.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Sam and Lara. I don't know if Rick, you've got anything to add?
Yeah, I'll come in a little bit. I mean, it's a big question. It's good to get it out of the way early, really. I mean, there's obviously the issue around Brexit is something that worries all of us in the UK, and part of the reason we want to put a showcase on this international is to highlight we're here, and all the rare disease community wants to reach out and collaborate as much as possible, regardless of that situation. I've been involved. We're involved in a few different EU projects. The first thing to say is anything where you're funded in the UK has remained stable, and that funding's continued. There's been no issue with ongoing funding. Certainly with a grant we've been working on, and we found out was successful yesterday, there was more worry and concern around the people leading those EU collaborations about bringing in too many UK partners and being more strategic about UK partners looking to bring in. And there are certainly wrinkles around the final process of how we're going to go about signing off and ensuring the funding can come through, which we're currently just starting to hear about, and we'll keep you informed of how that goes. But I'm pretty confident we'll find a way to get it over the line, because people want to see the funding there in the UK and things pushing forward with the rare disease research. But it's not straightforward. It's not as easy as it should be. But we are all still working as hard as we can to find ways to keep pushing with it. And hopefully our next foray into this EU funding will go smoothly and successfully, and we'll tell you how that goes.
Great, thanks everyone. So I wanted to ask a question actually from Lara especially, but also anyone else who wants to add into this. But obviously, Lara, you showcase quite a few different coalitions and collaborations that you're working on. And I think I wanted to know if you had any advice or lessons that you've learned from setting up those collaborations to ensure that they're sustained and successful throughout. Obviously, with these a lot smaller groups, sometimes collaborating and communicating with different groups can be really challenging, and you can fail at those first hurdles. How do you make sure that you actually are all on the same page and those are sustained and can actually grow into these really successful frameworks and collaborations and things?
No, it's a great question. And I think one key thing I'd like to say is it's okay if people aren't on the same page. I think that's, the beauty of collaboration. You get different voices, different opinions, as long as that doesn't then hold you back from progressing further, and that those differences opinions don't become fragmented. So it's ensuring that there is a space where people feel like their opinions can be heard. But I think the critical piece is having a very, very clear objective of what you want the coalition to do. Because when you just bring a group together for bringing a group together's sake, then that's when it kind of can fall a bit like tumbleweed, where it's like, where is this going? What is this doing? But if you have, that's why the consortium has been so successful, is that we have really clear outputs, timelines, deadlines, where there is no choice but to meet them and to work together in that way. With the community coalition, we come together at least once a year, pre-COVID. It was 2 to 3 times a year. And when people knew that those meetings were coming, it's much easier to ensure that you're still working together to keep the work going on. But it's just being respectful of people's times, having a clear outline and expectation of what it is to be part of that coalition, and rewarding people in the sense of not making people feel like they have to just kind of be yes people around the table just to be there. Every opinion is important and valid, and sometimes what you thought was the global consensus isn't, and that takes you in a different direction, and that's, I think, really healthy.
Yeah, so challenging some of those assumptions and actually hearing what people are saying around the table. I don't know if you have anything to add on this, Kattya, because obviously you've got so many different organisations operating in different countries, different languages, different cultures, and obviously, like Lara mentioned earlier, there can be some challenges with having those separate ones and knowing where the oversight lies with that. I wondered if you had anything to add.
So my case is I tend to specialise in the guidelines mainly, so we have loads of panels, and yes, people can have different points of view. I think one of the things we learned is making sure that there was an advocate, because sometimes you can have panels, not everybody can meet physically, some people can join virtually. This is before obviously COVID time, and it was making sure that if there was only one patient being present, that there was actually an additional advocate there to make sure they actually felt empowered to say whatever they wanted to say and express what they wanted to say. And we've had cases where there's complete difference of opinion, and it's how to manage those situations. So we've had quite a few of those. Also, it's been quite interesting. It's also the differences between different countries. What would be expected in India to what would be expected in the UK or the US would be totally different. And we've had all those sorts of discussions within panels. So it's just bringing it out, reflecting on what has been said, and then going back, and we tend to reflect back on minutes and trying to input everybody's opinion and trying to be inclusive.
Thanks, Kattya. It's funny, isn't it? It always just comes back to that core thing of communication, but sometimes it can be difficult to even get that right. But when you do get it right, it's great. Rick, you're unmuted, so I presume you've got something to say.
Just wanted to get Sam's opinion on it, actually, because obviously in IRDiRC you've got collaborations across companies and research institutions with lots of different competing interests, and you talked a bit about this in sort of kind of pre-competitive space. I just wondered how easy it is to establish that kind of trust between different competing organisations or interests in the work that you do.
So the initial question as well was around sustainability, right? Or do we just want to talk about, because I think there's a couple of where I think, and I suppose it links in, that everybody works really well together, really well, is when you're around a specific problem and you have something to solve. And I think, it's easy, and there's different levels of things where people feel comfortable. So from experience, whether that be in IRDiRC or just, through the years of rare disease, if you're thinking about, and I gave this example earlier as well, sharing data from any study that's been done, whether it have been sort of from a control arm in a clinical trial or natural history. Some things are much easier done than others, like guidelines on how you publish the most important data that can then be used by other research groups, rather than just the nice beautiful graphs. If you actually publish the data, which is something that I've just done through my last company. So we've just had a publication, and raw data's in, obviously it's anonymous data, but raw data's in there. And then, things that get a little bit more touchy and a little bit more difficult. So I think it's finding that commonality. I also actually wanted to address, one of the things about sustainability, and that question came around, and the way IRDiRC works as well. There's certain things as well from experience when setting up things like registries, and you have a great idea, you have a short-term objective, and then you have this absolutely amazing database. And I think there are a lot of issues around how you can actually make that sustainable. And I would suggest that Beacon would be good people to answer those types of questions. But the way IRDiRC does it as well, there's the group that has constantly renewing itself, because it constantly has work to do. And then I think we set the task force and working groups that are set up, depends on how long we need them. So as I said, they'd be around a specific problem, you have a goal and you achieve that, and then the task force may no longer be needed. So I think there's a whole load of play about how you do that, and the stakeholders you involve in it. Very long-winded answer there, right?
Could I add something to Sam? Actually, bringing up the sustainability, we did a piece of work where, because we have, I would say the network's work has doubled the network from 250 to now over 400 people in the network. And one of the pieces of work we were doing is every 2 years doing a survey to see how they felt through the process. So their reflections of being involved, whether they're being listened, how much work it involved, and whether they were picking up certain skills, just for us to be able to know how to support them. And that was being quite invaluable, because then we can focus on certain things to change each year to be able to support the network, whether they are people living with EB or whether they're the clinicians or whether they're researchers, and how they're collaborating. So just to improve that collaboration process, and we hope that that will then keep a sustainable network, building that knowledge. So whether that also is a suggestion.
Great, thank you so much, Sam and Kattya. And then I have a question that's kind of directed at everyone, but maybe more so for Lara and Sondra, which is just about, obviously, Lara, you touched on the language and the term patient and things like that. And I know I've personally been noticing more people using like person living with a rare disease. And then Sondra obviously said the person is not the rare disease, which was a really great quote. And I just wondered how you think we can approach these changes in language in a way that where people feel represented the whole way and benefits everyone. Do you think that it has to be something that the patient organisations kind of say, this is what we're doing, or does it come organically from the community a bit more? And how can we make that something where it doesn't just become a buzzword, but it's actually a real change that makes people feel represented now and into the future? How do you think that'll go forward in the community?
I think it has to be a mixture of both. I think ultimately you don't want to make the decision, the organizations don't want to make the decision on behalf of the community they're trying to, represent. We have been doing some kind of surveying and some stakeholder engagement in trying to find out what people's preferences are. I think the one thing that we have found that people are concerned about losing that term is how long it took for people in industry to pay attention to patient expert, patient engagement. They're really big words. And I think that it needs to be a balance of perhaps maybe keeping the terms more formally when it comes to research and industry and inclusivity, but ensuring that the process of how those people are included and treated is that they're not just a patient. They are so much more than a patient. They are, the decisions that are made as part of a trial impact that person for far longer than when they walk out that doctor's office. It's how they cope with that treatment in relationships, in their diet, in what they're eating, in their exercise, their movement, their work, their education, their relationships, their moods, their mental health. That is much more important and what needs to be considered. So I'm less concerned about what it's called, although some people really don't like it. But I think, again, like the risk of losing the momentum that we've built. But as long as that person that is included in the research, the trial, the stakeholder is made to feel and is treated as so much more than just the term patient.
Yeah,
I have to agree with that as well. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine, because people are not just one thing. So, you know, as well as a patient, I am a patient. I have a, you know, anyway, I'm a patient, but I'm also a researcher. And it's interesting, I attended a conference at one point, and they were saying it was a tick box where you had to say, which community group are you from? Are you from the BAME community or whatever, or a researcher? Because obviously I can't be both, can I? I can't be a person of colour and a research. I can only be one or the other. So tick a box. And that drives me mad, because we are more than one thing. Sometimes you have a person who is a patient because they're on a patient trial, but they're also a rare disease advocate as well. And I am both those things, you know, and I'll call myself one thing or the other. But I think from the grassroots organisations, as Laura says, it can evolve. And the grassroots organisations have to speak up and say when they don't feel what they are referred to works for them. So I absolutely will now call people out when they keep calling me hard to reach. I'm from a hard to reach community, because I am not, you know, I am not hard to reach. I'm everywhere, as I've said before, you know, and that term for some people get quite angry about it. And particularly if I'm sat in a meeting as me, and people are talking, where are the hard to reach people? And I'm right there. It's just they ignore those groups. So thinking of the terms, people from a community group may not like the term, because each word that you use has a certain connotation. So a patient and a doctor, those two words imply a difference in the power balance between that relationship. So it is important, the terminology and the social or psychosocial context in which that is spoken.
I just wanted to add, in addition to that I think we're also talking about different things, because you're talking about a patient being engaged and called on as part of research and trials, where they are there because of their lived experience of a condition. But then you're also talking about exactly what you just said, Sondra, where we are experts in more than just living with the condition. We're experts running an organization, being part of research, being a lay voice. That doesn't just mean a patient voice, it also means being able to be a bridge between the community. And so we're also exploring the term just expert voice. And that represents, you know, you are an expert, whether you're a health professional, whether you're a person living with a condition, whether you're running an organization, and it flattens it as well. It makes those stakeholders equal rather than dividing them into their different areas, because you can actually have a doctor who is living with a rare condition as well. So I think leaning away, I think in a research trial, it's slightly different, because they do need people to be there because they are living with it or impacted. But when we're talking more broadly in our non-profit space, we're trying to use just the term expert voice, and then it's up to that person to describe what their expertise is in. And it can be more than one thing, and often is.
If I
Kattya, yeah, sorry.
could add, it was one of the first projects I worked with DEBRA was looking at the psychosocial guideline, which Sondra was also involved with us, and it was a learning experience. I went to a focus group, and I think you have all those terms also mean totally different things around the world. And it also means totally different things within a family structure. So one of the things we found was really strongly that they felt that they wanted to be described as people living with EB rather than that they had EB or were EB. And the families as well felt really, really strongly. They were not carers, they were parents, but they were also suffering or being impacted by EB. So yeah, I think there's a whole dynamics that we have to sort of think about when we're writing, in our cases, when we're writing the guidelines. And I think it depends on the topic as well of the guidelines. So psychosocial, that was naturally something that we could embed into the script, but then you have really sort of very research-based guidelines where they really struggled to engage with the patient side, such as the lab diagnosis or something like that. Anesthesia is another one. So the challenges depending on the clinical area that we work in.
Can I add to what you said, Kattya? Yeah, because for my research, I focused on people with EB and EDS actually. And one of the things when I work with these communities with people were often referred to as sufferers of, and that has another connotation as well. So in my experience, people did not like that term. I'm a sufferer, because again, it's the power, I'm the sufferer rescuer, power balance and everything. So it is important how we refer to people.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting as for people who maybe aren't living with rare diseases. They might only see themselves as a patient in a certain setting. So if they're in a hospital or a doctor's office, and like I only found out very recently that I have family members who actually have rare diseases, but I wouldn't say, oh, that's my auntie, she's the patient. She's just my auntie. So it's really interesting when you actually, like you say, Lara, boil it down to the actual lived everyday experiences of people, whether they're going to the shop or whatever they're doing. That's what's important, and that's sometimes what we can forget, or people forget when they're trying to make these big frameworks and get people involved. It's those things that are really important that can often slip away, that we need to put at the forefront. I think that it's kind of nearing the end of the session now, and we don't have any more questions coming in, but it's been really nice to see everyone engaging in the chat. And I just wanted to add as well that if you're aware, we do a student voice essay competition every year, and the winner of that this year actually has approached her essay from both a medical student perspective and a rare disease patient perspective, or person living with a rare disease perspective. And if you want to learn more about that, that's in our final session of the showcase, if you are interested in the topics of intersectionality and how that kind of comes into play. I thought I'd just do a little push there for that. And also a reminder for everyone to sign up to today's breakout sessions. You can see those on the agenda, and there's a real range of different things that you can get involved with, from research to healthcare professionals to policy. There's loads of different things that should spark your interest, so you can sign up for those today as well and be involved throughout the whole day, or you can get involved at lunchtime through our pitch and mix networking sessions as well, if that's something that you fancy doing too. I'd just like to extend a final massive thank you to all of our speakers in today's session. I think it's been a really great way to kick off the International Rare Disease Showcase, and hopefully we'll set the tone for a really exciting next 3 days as well. So thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.